Let's go ahead and start letting people in the weight room, from the weight room. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are going to give folks just another couple of minutes and then we'll get started. Well, good morning and welcome to our peer exchange entitled How It All Adds Up, Transportation Performance Management Best Practices. This webinar is being co-hosted by the Utah Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration. It is focused on national best practices for transportation performance management. Today, you will hear from experts across the country regarding three main areas of performance management: safety, infrastructure conditions, and reliability. My name is Muriel Sochmil with X Factor Strategic Communications, and I will be emceeing this event. The objectives for the event are to foster collaboration and information sharing of best practices for the purposes of advancing the state of the practice regarding transportation performance management. Over the next few hours, we will analyze and assess national and state performance management to provide recommendations on potential new performance measures. There are three sub-objectives that we're going to focus on today. The first is analysis. So an analysis of the national performance management data for safety, infrastructure condition, and reliability. This will help us better understand trends, target setting approaches, and achievement by state DOTs. The second sub-objective is assessment. So we will assess the performance management data that provides a comprehensive and compelling story on the results of the performance management provisions. And the third and final sub-objective for today is identification. So we will be identifying and building on future needs for performance measures. I do just need to make a note that while we have private sector representatives participating and presenting today, UDOT and FHWA do not specifically endorse any individual company or product. Also, just a few housekeeping items. The event is being recorded. It will be made available to participants afterwards. It may also be posted online. As you guys are entering our meeting, we've intentionally structured this to encourage participation from all of our participants. We ask, though, that unless you're called on with a specific question, to please mute yourself so that we can hear our presenters. We welcome you to turn on your camera during our Q&A portions of the meeting and actively ask questions that way, or you can drop your questions or comments in the chat. We will be utilizing Zoom polling throughout the event and welcome your participation in those polls as well. Now with that, I will go ahead and turn the time over to Ryan Bailey with the Utah Department of Transportation. So Ryan Bailey is the performance manager for the Utah Department of Transportation. He has been in this position for almost 2 years now. Under his direction, UDOT is using performance measures to make key decisions that have improved the department's way of doing business. Ryan holds both a Master's of Business Administration degree and a bachelor's degree in business management from Utah State University. Ryan has been married for 16 years and has 4 kids. Ryan?
Thank you. Pulling up my screen right now. I'm super excited to be presenting to you all today. Just a little background on why this all came together. I was able to get with Kelly Lund, my FHWA liaison here in Utah, and we discussed having a good, group gathering of all these performance managers and and discussing performance metrics and figuring out how to do things. And we eventually got it to where we could do a peer exchange, and this is how it came together. So super excited to share exactly what Utah is doing here, as well as hearing from multiple states. So thank you all for jumping on, as well as those states that are presenting. As I'm going through my presentation today, I just want to do a really high level overview of what Utah is doing with performance management. So bear with me for the next 10, 15 minutes as I discuss different things that I see what we're moving here within Utah. So with that, when we started performance management here at Utah, we try to figure out the way that we're going to structure it and figure out a way that we can make it so that everybody's kind of invited to the table. And with that, we went to our FHWA guidebook to answer some questions about performance management. And as you can see, we did kind of a flow chart of how performance management flows. And the 4 questions we were trying to answer while we were doing this was, where do we want to go? How do we get there? What will it take? And how do we do? And that's a key in performance management. Is the last one, is how did we do, and to reassess and go back through. So with that, as you follow through this flow chart, we're able to answer a lot of questions with performance management. And we're still working on a couple of things. As you can see on the right side, we have some current challenges that we're still working through, which is understanding the importance or need of performance leadership or management, but also governance of the performance measures and monitoring and analyzing. We do have a lot of data here, and now we're trying to put that into a certain sector. And with that, we're able to set goals. We're able to get our input from our leadership, from our public, and then we're able to outline strategies to go through it. So this is our overview of what we're trying to accomplish. Now with that, we also have our federal performance measures, which is a big piece of what we're talking about today, is what do federal performance measures mean to us? We have a dashboard that shows all of our current measures and how we're doing, as well as trends over the last couple of years. Now, when I saw this, when I first came into my position 2 years ago, I related it pretty closely to like a hot air balloon, where it's up in the air, it's hard to see, it's still going up, sometimes they're coming down, but at the same time, it's a really tricky situation as a performance manager to feel like these federal performance measures are actually tied to us as individuals. And so with that, that's kind of my talking point today as I go through this, is to talk about these measures and how we can tie them to the individual down below. Whether it's individual measures, whether there's state measures that we have currently, or whether there's team measures within your organization to tie to these federal performance measures, or maybe they're not even directly related. They're just other measures that are out there. So with that, Utah has done a great job of displaying their state measures. We have a strategic direction page, and on this page, it gives information about Utah, how many employees we have, all of our public miles, assets, equipments, and innovations. When people go to this page, which is public facing, it's a very detailed, very robust system that you can go in and look at multiple facets. But the part that obviously as a performance manager that I love the most of is this new enhanced quality of life framework. This came out this last couple of years that our directors are putting together, and we're tying performance measures to each one of these. So in our decision-making, when we're starting to look at performance measures, we want to make sure that we're tying to one of these 4 framework sections specifically. Also on this strategic direction page, obviously, is our strategic direction goals. These 3 goals have different subcategories that tie up, that feed up into our overall metric or score that we're getting currently here at UDOT. Now, some of these are, a little bit older. We've had them for quite a while. People always ask, well, how did you come up with these performance measures? And it was a leadership grouping decision. They came together on a meeting that they had, and they discussed and said, hey, how do we want to create, or what do we want to measure on? What's important to us? And they came up with these safety or mobility or infrastructure performance measures, and they started to put a number to them and started to say, okay, how much weight should we put towards each one? And as you can see, it's really small in this picture, but there is a percentage of weight that these carry up into. Now with these, we're able to see how we're doing, rank them over the current years. There may be a gap in one of them because we did some adjustments and started to make things a little bit easier for us to understand. And it did take a little bit of a dip, but it was something that we decided we were going to do internally to create that and move that forward. Now with this, I feel like UDOT is one of the top in the state because we do have these very specific, very out there for people to look at performance measures that help direct kind of the decisions that we're making. So kudos to UDOT for that one. Now, a couple of things that we have put into play that if you were to go to our strategic direction website, we have an annual statistical summary report that we put out every year. This is a report that came into fruition because of the need for statistics or direct information for people to quote within UDOT or even outside of UDOT. When people come to this page, they're able to click on different targets or different, I call them assets that people can go in and look at and say, okay, how many bridges do we have? How many road miles do we have? What is the finances? How are they allocating? What is the total amount? That's all located here in our annual statistical summary. Now, when we talked with that hot air balloon, we were trying to talk about how to connect these down to individuals. And with UDOT, I feel like we're doing a great job of connecting our individual or group goals in different pages or hub pages that have been made. This is an example of one of those pages that we have and some divisional or tactical measures that are on there. This is our freeway performance metrics. So you can go in and look at travel time, speed report, and mobility videos that are out there. Another really neat tactical measure or division measure that we have is a dashboard. It's a mobility dashboard that UDOT put together. This is a region that is in Utah. We have 4 different regions. This is Region 2's dashboard that we're able to see hours of delay, trends that are going on, and a quick, precise message as people are looking at this. They can see it by the hour. You can break it down by day if they wanted to at that point to see what's going on. So very high level dashboard that people are able to make decisions from. One thing that we are trying to do to connect with the federal measures is we're right now in the middle of our long-term targets that we're putting together with FHWA. These are our 4-year targets that we're building. This is a calendar set that we're putting together currently with within our group to get these targets placed before the October deadline. It's coming up fast. We have a lot of good feedback from the groups that we're working with, which is done on an individual group basis to talk about these target measures, to make sure that they are correct, that they are what they're looking for, as well as that they're something that can push the group for the next 4 years. So we're excited to see what comes out of that. We're currently right now in about the June to July phase. We're pushing it through to our upper leadership soon and creating that for the executive review. One thing that we're really focused on right now is our assets, as well as making sure that we have all the information needed to make correct decisions within our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 assets. We're in the collecting, I want to say right now, making sure that all that information is there. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why is this important? Why do you guys need all this information? Well, once we are able to collect all of our tier 1 information, which is our targets, our conditions, knowing where the data comes from, being able to forecast a lot of this information, we're able to make good decisions. A lot of this comes into play too with the people that we're working with. We have a lot of great employees and great people here at UDOT that really care about using technology, using the data that we have to make good decisions. And so this is actually a group within, just to back up a little bit, we have a performance management group that I'm a part of. We have our risk group that's involved there, and we have our asset management group, which is Chris Whipple. He's most likely on this call, so I don't want to say anything too crazy about Chris, other than he's doing a great job. He's only about a year in his position. And then we have our performance management, our process management group, which is a new person in our position, Lindsay. So with that, Chris is able to gather all this information and put it into play. And we're starting to do some cool things in the future. So I'll be sharing those in the slide deck in just a second. So with that, like I said, we have our AM, which is our asset, our PM, which are performance and our risk management. This is something we're building for the future. I talked about being just a second, and here it is. It's already here on the slide. What we're trying to create is a dashboard or some type of metric system within our department that a group can go into the system and look at it and say exactly where I am with the decisions that I make. Now, right now we have a pavement condition deterioration curve on here. What this is meaning to us as performance management is saying that after the course of so long of an asset being in place, it will deteriorate. And the way we're working with other groups on this is saying, hey, get us some deterioration curves. Let us know how long your assets are going to last for. And we're going to start building performance measures as well as we're going to be able to start making decisions within our group based off of these deterioration curves. And what that will look like is something similar to this, is that at a certain point in that current year, when someone's looking at this dashboard, they can say, okay, if I allocate a certain amount of funds within the department to this asset, this is what will happen with our performance or with the performance of the asset. Or if I take away some of those funds, what will happen? If they're able to just turn off that valve and say, we're not going to allocate any more money to it, what will that look like? So we're starting to build this together. This is coming a little bit slower, but it's going to where we want to make sure it's right before we put it out there. What we've also put together is a risk score on this so that we can articulate and say, if you stop putting money towards this, this is the risk that's going to be taking place. This is something that we're excited for to come forward. It's still in the making, but we do have another tool that I'm going to show you that is really exciting to talk about where we allocate funds to, which is this performance forecasting. This has been built and it's being kind of played with right now. It's going through our consultant High Street, which you're going to hear from one of the consultants High Street today. But this is a performance forecasting dashboard that we're putting together that if you are able to pull some of these funds to allocate them in a certain way, you'd be able to see from the dashboard itself directly how that's going to manipulate your asset itself, whether it's payment and how that shifts the good, fair, poor along the way, as well as how does that influence our safety and performance measures. This tool, like I said, it's kind of been a long process coming in, but it is something that we feel like if we can capitalize on using our assets in the right way and allocating funds in the right way, we can start seeing the increased targets going up. So if someone has a performance measure of 80% and they're currently at 76 and we're able to allocate a certain amount of funds to it to help them get to that performance level, then we'd be able to see how other assets along that way would be shifted or moved so that we can then make good decisions to push those allocations forward. This is down on the individual level. Like I said, there's different ways that we're trying to tether ourselves to that FHWA performance measures. This one is down on the individual that we're building currently right now. This is my group with the HPMS submittal. We built a dashboard for this group to walk through their submittal. We're going to be putting a lot of these into play with a lot of our groups within UDOT that give specific dashboards for individuals so they can look at their performance, so they can see how they're doing. This is only phase one right now of saying this is just checking the boxes. They're going through those different stages to complete their tasks. Next year, when we create this dashboard, it will actually have a grading system on there. So if they go past a certain deadline, it'll start to tick off the performance number. And we'll be able to have an all-encompassing grade at the end of the thing to be able to go back to our group and say, hey, where do we fall short? Now, we'll put performance measures on this to say, hey, we're expecting you to be at least 90% of your total submittal. And at the end of the year, we're able to go back and say, well, hey, you hit 92. Let's look at your successes. Let's look at where you kind of fell short and move forward from there. So this is the individual section that I said where we're tying to. So as we review back and we look at that hot air balloon, it may not be as far out there as I thought it was when I first started. I was like, God, there's no way we're able to connect to this. This is too far. It's a pie in the sky. But as you look back and we go through what we're working on and the small things and the questions that we've asked as we started, we're starting to see that we are connecting to our federal performance measures on an individual level through dashboards, through this one's through the freeway system that we have set up in place. And the AM, PM, RM integration is helping us ensure our state measures are tied to these federal performance measures, and then performance forecasting through team group settings, as well as other tactical individual measures that are maybe not included in there, but they are still tied to these federal performance measures in the end. So with that, I will end my presentation with a couple minutes to spare, and I appreciate y'all jumping on. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, for your presentation. As a fellow Utahn, I appreciate how we're measuring the performance of our transportation system and tying it back to quality of life, good health, better mobility, connected communities, and strong economy. Okay, now we will turn to Kelly Lund, with the Federal Highway Administration Utah Division. Let me just give a brief introduction to Kelly here. Kelly is a transportation specialist for FHWA. He started his federal career with the Department of Defense as a planner for the Rail and Special Equipment Division at Hill Air Force Base. For the last 18 years, Kelly has been a planner in the Utah Division. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Southern Utah University. Kelly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting me have some time. A few minutes of your time. I first want to thank Ryan for taking the lead and getting this TPM best practice webinar out. Excuse me. I want to thank Muriel and our staff for organizing it. Let me get my screen up here. Okay, so, excuse me, I'm going to drop back a little bit and talk about Federal Highway Administration's role in transportation performance management. TPM is a strategic approach to using system information to make investment and policy decisions to achieve national performance goals. It's an ongoing process that provides information to help decision-making, improves communication between decision makers, stakeholders, and the public, ensures targets and measures are developed cooperatively and are data-driven and or have an objective. TPM and asset management work together. TPM is an approach to make your system performance, to manage your system performance. Asset management is an application of this approach. It's the engine that drives the infrastructure performance. So why are we gathering and working with all this data? Well, first of all, it's the right thing to do to improve investment decision-making, return on investments, and resource allocation. It improves system performance, increases accountability and transparency for everyone, including the public. It helps demonstrate a link between funding and performance. And often overlooked, it improves coordination that might not have occurred while we are working in silos across the state DOTs, MPOs, and transit agencies, and with other planning partners. It really has improved our FHWA division office silos in planning, safety, bridge, pavement, and all those areas. And here is our national performance goals. So the number one, safety, to achieve a significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. We need to maintain the infrastructure condition in a state of good repair to achieve a significant reduction in congestion, improve efficiency and reliability of the system, improve the national freight network, and strengthen the ability of rural communities to access trade markets and support regional economic development. Environmental sustainability to enhance the performance of the system while protecting and enhancing the natural environment. Reduce project costs, promote jobs and the economy, expedite the movement of people and goods by accelerating project completion, to eliminate delays in project development and delivery. This includes reducing regulatory burdens and improving work practices. So me and Ryan talked earlier about where does this data go? Why, you know, the who, what, where, when, and why. So I thought I'd bring up a few of these. And so where does the data go? This data goes into long-range statewide transportation plans. It goes into the STIP, goes into the asset management plans, strategic highway safety plans, state freight plan, freight bottleneck reports, transit agency management and safety plans, and HPMS, Highway Performance Monitoring System. Here's a few of our reports and publications that your data can be used in. Excuse me. So the innovator is one of them. Public Roads is a publication that comes out. The Highway Statistics is a book that has all the information from HPMS into it. The last one on this list is the status of the nation's highways, bridges, and transit, conditions and performance. This is a big one. This report goes to Congress. So congressional leaders can look at it and see and determine where we need more money, more infrastructure development. So where to get the info? Our frequently asked questions page has all these areas that you can go into. The link is there at the top. They also have my presentation, so if you want it later, we can send it out with these links active. So one of the main sources that, like HPMS data, and this data goes into the Highway Statistics series. It's stored, has numerous tables broken down by national and state level. It's a really good resource to go into for digging for data. Highly recommend going to this page. And then this is our transportation performance management website. As you can see, the little bubbles there, those are the areas that are covered. And underneath those is clickable links to areas in those to go to for information. There's also a link up at the top right corner if you see the little TPM toolbox. It's a really neat feature to go into and look at. Sorry, my bad. So this is a TPM toolbox. There's a guidebook available for you to look and read. You can actually do a self-assessment for your state or your organization in that area. And there's also TPM resources there. So this is our TPM dashboard. All states should really go in here and look. Prior to this page, there's a United States map. You can click on each state. This is what Utah's is. You can see there's highway safety, highway infrastructure condition, highway reliability, emissions reductions. You can click on those and go and see what data you have and submitted in. Highly recommended. And also we have some great other resources with the AASHTO TPM portal. They have training on there. We have training too if you reach out to us. And also, like Ryan stated earlier, this is the front page of what we see when we enter the UDOT strategic direction and performance measures for the federal performance measures. Each one of these areas you can click in, you can go in and analyze. You can actually pull the data out and put them in an Excel spreadsheet if you want to work with the data. So it's really cool. And that is my presentation. There's my information. If you want to get a hold of me, or like I said, we submitted my presentation. So if you want to get a hold of me, there's where it's at.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was an informative presentation, especially, we're able to outline exactly what FHWA's Utah division is doing to improve decision-making, system performance, and return on investment using like that data-driven approach. It's also great to see kind of how all these online resources are readily available. Should we, just take a look at your website? Okay, well, let's go ahead now and move to Anna. Anna Batista is a senior consultant with the High Street Consulting Group. She focuses on transportation performance management, the organizational underpinnings of successful performance improvement, and the use of data to support decision-making. She has gained a national perspective on transportation performance management through work with FHWA, on MAP 21 performance measures, the rulemaking and research within CHRP. Anna works with state and local agencies to develop measures, assess data needs for performance, and integrate performance measures into agency goals and processes. So with that, we will turn it to Anna.
Thank you, Muriel. Can everyone see and hear me? And should I share my screen, Muriel?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. And I'm going to try and do this so the sound works. Bear with me if there is any issue. I think I've got it. Okay. So good morning, everyone. It's exciting for me to be here with all of you guys. Performance management is what I focus most of my time on. And this, of course, is performance season with the federal measures. And this project, Making Targets Matter, which some of you have probably heard about over the last couple of years. Maybe some of you participated in our peer exchanges back in the fall of 2019. But finally, at long last, the guide is published and is on NCHRP's website. I'll drop that link in the chat at the end of this. So please go check it out after today. So Making Targets Matter, High Street worked on this with our partners at ICF. And I'm going to begin with one of my favorite products of the research, which is a video. So let's see, hopefully the sound will work. Can you all hear it?
Yes. Yeah.
Making Targets Matter, managing performance to enhance decision-making. If you work on performance issues, you have likely experienced the set it and forget it phenomenon. Performance is discussed with enthusiasm, targets are set, and the world moves on. Work continues as it always has, decisions are made the same way, and targets fade from the immediacy of today's tasks. How does an agency make their targets matter by driving later decisions? How can a practitioner learn which levers will move the needle on performance? One crucial answer to this is feedback. Feedback can be best understood from a commonplace example, your home heating system. In this system, a thermometer serves as a sensor to gather on-the-ground information about room temperature. When the temperature drops below the set point, a signal is sent along a pathway to turn on the furnace. This cycle is repeated to continually maintain a warm house. A similar cycle, informed by a similar set of sensors, pathways, information, action, and repetition, can also help deliver feedback in a complex system like the transportation network. This video series and accompanying guidebook discuss how your agency can develop people and data sensors to share information about transportation system conditions, establish pathways to bring information to your agency, and use that information to make adjustments and communicate your agency's performance story.
So there's 3 more videos like that that go over the basics of what's in here in the products. As I mentioned, we do have a guidebook, which is now out on NCHRP's website, and these videos, which you can go check out at any point. I'd say the main elements of our research was kind of one, this feedback framework, right? How do we conceptualize getting information to improve our decisions? We also have a whole suite of strategies to try and implement to make that feedback happen, to improve either the quality of feedback you're getting or how frequently you're getting it. Last part of the guidebook is a series of case studies, which some of you may have participated in, about how agencies are implementing this in the planning process, in programming decisions, and in more day-to-day operational decisions. And I'd say an important thing about this guide and project is we really, really wanted to go beyond just talking about what you should do and get into the really tangible details about how to do it. What questions you can ask, what conversations you can have, what analyses you can perform to start implementing this and making it a reality. Because we've all seen the TPM chart, the PPP guidebook chart that shows you should be integrating feedback. But of course, it's implementing it. That's the hard part. So this guidebook is really trying to get into that, to find that secret sauce that makes performance management meaningful and not just a check the box activity. So just noting, this goes beyond the federal measures. You can apply this to federal measures and target setting, but it also really applies to all performance management throughout your agency, and in fact, perhaps even more so for those non-federal measures. We're in a implementation phase now, so we've got a new round of peer exchanges that are going to be happening, and I hope many of you on this call will join us for some of those. Please reach out if you're interested. And so for these new research goals, what we want to do is evolve this framework, this feedback framework. What else kind of would be helpful to make this work in agencies today, especially in the post-COVID world, the new world we find ourselves in? We want to find new strategies, refine the ones we have, deepen them, add new strategies, hear what you all are doing now. And then, of course, we want to report on new success stories. And so how are people implementing them? Have some new case studies out there.
You know, well,
I was just going to ask if folks to mute themselves if they can.
A lot better answer than that. It was originally a lot more, but that was because it was going to be a bigger.
So what does it mean to make targets matter? We got an answer in that video there. Really, it's that we want to drive decisions, right? We want the targets, we want the feedback about performance to drive your decisions. It's really hard to figure out what's going to move the needle. How you have to figure out what actions you can take that will meet your target. That's where we get into that feedback. Feedback is really crucial to all of this performance management work. And like I said, it's easy to say and it's hard to implement. But the basic idea of this project, feedback, is going to optimize your performance. And that if you get more frequent feedback, and you can get that from both people or from data, and they're experiencing the transportation network, that information is going to be what helps you make better decisions and take actions that meet your performance and your targets. Here's that house example of a thermostat, right? Temperature, you've got a sensor, your thermometer, gets the temperature, sends a signal, and then you take an action. And that's the basic premise that we're using here. You know, in this transportation network, in our agencies, we have people and data out there that can tell us a lot about what's happening in our transportation system. And our job as performance managers is to find the ways to identify that information.
You gotta go soon, Ari.
Get it into our agencies through various opportunities to get that in. So there's that holistic view of feedback in a transportation system. Okay, so let's look at some of the strategies that we've developed. We put them into 3 bins. One of them is about preparing those sensors, right? Identify them and get them ready. The second bin is about establishing pathways. How do you set up the opportunities so that information will flow to your agency? And then putting it to work, making those adjustments to your actions and decisions, and then telling your performance story, which was a big topic in a lot of our peer exchanges. Preparing sensors. One of those is building buy-in for the long term with your partners. This means reaching out across your agency and out to other partners, and reaching out early, not just at the last minute because your federal measures are due and so you're going to really quick call the MPO. But try and start that early so you can have a real conversation. Allow for kind of a sense of ownership among the people you're inviting. That's going to really help to make it a more meaningful activity. Maintain transparency and neutrality, and then really kind of listen and show you're listening. These are some of the core things we heard from agencies who we felt were really implementing some of these, notably folks in Utah and the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Next is data sensors, right? We all have lots of data and the amount of data is increasing. So learning how to navigate a data system or an ecosystem or a data lake perhaps is really important these days. Managing data as a performance manager, you're probably not the data scientist, you're probably not the expert on data, but your job is to have conversations with those people and know who they are and know how to get them involved. Okay, so figure out where your data is, do a data map. Find out, talk to IT about how you can automate as much as possible. have those conversations early with your owners. And if there's any kind of hesitation about sharing data, which does sometimes come up, invite them into the performance process. Explain to them why you're doing what you're doing and how it's important and helpful for everyone. And finally, ask for data elements that perhaps aren't available currently, but would be helpful to your analyses. And that's something that's going to help be able to do, maybe you can't get all of the information you want right now, that feedback, but doing it in the future is going to be really helpful. We've got establishing pathways, convening, bring people together, especially among MPOs. Convening is a really important tool. And so, one of the things we heard is that these convenings shouldn't be just once a year or once every 2 years in the case of the federal measures. Make a habit of short and frequent conversations. Make sure you've got the right people in the room, up and down the agency, different levels of tenure, different areas, across boundaries. Know whether the purpose of your convening is to kind of be open-ended and visioning, or if you're there to solve a really tactical problem. We had examples of both that agencies shared with us that are really helpful. Make sure you leave room for discussion to flourish and don't just present the whole time, and time these convenings strategically. One of my favorite strategies is formalizing assessments of what works. I think this is something that's still growing at a lot of agencies and is not quite institutionalized across the board, across performance areas. But this is really the heart of that feedback, of getting a sense for which of our actions are leading to the performance results we want to see. So important to this is make sure you know all of the different analytical options that you have. Talk with some more technical experts if you're not sure. Align those technical and planning conversations. So that might be with engineers. They might not know you need certain data or certain information for these types of assessments. And so if you can have conversations with them, it's going to get you more information you need for the analyses that are going to tell you what works. Understand the mechanics of all of your metrics. Okay, it might, long equations might make your eyes glaze a little bit, but it's really important to know those details and technical mechanics so that you can have the right conversations and know what your metrics are telling you. And of course, I'd say the most important point here, set assessment points. If you don't put a date on the calendar, most people are not going to get around to this, because looking back to assess what's already been done is never front and center on anybody's mind. We all have things that are pressing. We have new deadlines, things that are due, plans, reports, and meetings. So set an assessment point and do that regularly. That's going to be what brings people together to take the time to look back. Okay, finally, putting it all to work. The big picture, making adjustments to your actions, adjusting your decisions. And for here, I think it's important, know all the different options that you have, your menu of options. So, can you move funding? Can you do a study? Can you bring together leadership and present to leadership? Like, what are the things that you can do to try and make things happen out on the transportation system? Start where you are. Don't worry about where you want to be. This is a long-term process. Embrace incrementalism. Just because you can't hop all the way over to making a huge change, don't let that stop you from making small changes now. Okay, DOTs are big ships. We all know that. Institutionalize feedback. Make it a part of what you guys do. And then seize opportunities as they arise. Sometimes it might be a change in an MPO board or leadership. Or some other, somebody has a particular question that they're suddenly very interested in, use that opportunity to make changes. And finally, just try something. Don't let analysis paralysis set in. Okay, now when you do all of this, you want to tell people about it. You want to tell your leadership, you want to tell your legislators, you want to tell the public all that you're doing around performance to make the agency work better and make the transportation system better. And so stories are really important. They're what let people hear you. We know we love data, right? Data is important. Everyone's talking about data. We need more data scientists and data analysts. But you really need to blend that with this storytelling element, because without that, people aren't going to hear you. Use this opportunity to tell kind of the big performance truths, the fact that this is a long-term effort. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is going to take several years. It's going to take several iterations. So, let people build those long-term expectations now. Keep things simple, but don't oversimplify, right? Give people the interesting bits that they're interested in. And then, of course, let that story evolve. Just because you have a good story this year, it may look very different going forward, or it may not be as relevant going forward. So let that evolve. There's a summary of our strategies. Of course, these are all outlined in the guidebook. I'm going to take a quick moment to touch on something that's happening right now that I think all of you are probably involved in, and that's target setting, right? It's a big year for TPM. We're all out there setting targets, and it can feel hard to make targets matter when we're setting targets for the federal measures. That is a statement we heard throughout our peer exchanges. Was simply, I'm going to skip around here, simply that the federal targets don't matter. I'm sorry, federal highways folks, don't take it too harshly. The thing we heard most often is that the time frame is too short to do anything, right? The programs are already set for the next 2 and 4 years. So how am I supposed to pull those levers to make targets matter? And I think what we found out as we progressed on this, and then also another NCHRP project on target setting, which I believe the guide will be pre-released for that, so you all can benefit from it while you're setting those targets, is that its target setting process is a part of what you do to make your targets matter. So originally we thought, okay, well, we have our targets and they're established. Now let's talk about making them matter. And we do the work, we do the analysis. But it really has come about, we started thinking that it's the process of target setting is central to all the work you're going to do to make it matter. If you take this target setting process seriously and you use it to have some of these really meaningful discussions, that's going to be what makes it matter later on. It hits on all these major strategies that I just talked through. And so, these are some quotes here about how federal targets can matter. It wasn't so much the exact targets, the process, that didn't matter so much, but it's the fact that target setting and publishing these targets publicly is something that gets leadership's attention, right? It gets some performance in front of leadership so you can have that discussion in a more meaningful way. It's simply the fact that you're talking about the numbers that gets more people thinking and more involved. And it's having these hard conversations in the target setting process that can lead to better, more meaningful actions later. So, we really encourage you, use this opportunity you have right now. It may not feel like an opportunity, it might feel like a little bit of a burden to do these federal performance reporting. But if you're interested in making your targets really matter throughout your agency and getting people engaged in the performance process, even with other measures, we urge you to take the target setting process seriously. Use some of these strategies in the guide as you're sitting around the table and having discussions among your agency and partners. And then that's going to set the stage to continue with those strategies and integrating feedback as you move forward. So that is my a summary and assessment of our research. And as I mentioned, we do have a new round of peer exchanges that we want to put on this fall. We need all of you to make those successful. If you're interested in sitting around, right now we are planning for them to be in person. Expenses are covered, travel expenses, and it's a chance for you and some of the peers on this call or others who couldn't make it today to talk about the challenges you're facing, either federal measures or non-federal measures, whether you're in planning or if you're in kind of a more operational day-to-day kind of setting, and talk about what challenges you have, how you can improve things, sharing best practices, and telling that story. So please reach out to me. I'm very interested to hear from all of you about joining in one or more peer exchange. And I think with that, Muriel, that's what I have.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. I'm Erin Scott. I work here with Muriel. We're going to kind of tag team our emceeing and facilitating today. So thank you, Anna, for that presentation. I just have to mention, I love your use of analysis paralysis on that. I frequently suffer from that myself. It's one of my favorite terms to remind myself when we can plan and we need to do our due diligence of our planning and prepping and learning and analyzing these things, but eventually we just have to try something, make a decision and try it. So I love that reminder. Perfect. So we're going to now turn it over to our participants for some questions. If you have any questions for Anna, please feel free to drop your question in the chat or Q&A, and then we can also use the raise hand feature. And when you're called on, please feel free to unmute yourself and pull up your video. We'd love to see you and interact. So if we have any questions, we have just a minute here for any of those. Just a second. Perfect, Edgardo. If you want to go ahead and ask your question. You will want to unmute yourself.
That's the data sensing into the processes. You got instant feedback on my mute.
Sorry, Edgardo, I still can't hear you.
Oh,
I can hear.
So thank you, all three of you, for the presentations. They're great. I have a question about we've heard a lot about what to do and the stories of how we're all getting it done. And I want to ask about the role of leadership at each of the agencies in making it happen. How have you seen that, whether it's Anna or Ryan or Kelly that wants to take that on? What have you seen features of leadership that really make this a success versus not when you're trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, leadership was definitely one of the core elements to making this successful. And the big picture answer is, if your leader's not interested, it's going to be a lot harder to implement this, certainly agency-wide. One thing we did try to do, because that came up in our conversations, was that make the strategies help workable, even if you're working on an individual level. Like, these are things that you as the performance manager can go out and do, have conversations with your partners, with other offices in your agency, and kind of starting the process small, even if you can't do it larger scale with agency support or with leadership support. We do also have leadership pulled out specifically in the guide as one of the kind of three main. We've got leadership, staff, and partners, external partners, called out with some strategies to address each of those, tailored for what's most likely to work with each of those. That's in the kind of developing your sensor and building buy-in section. So I'd say, and then, I mentioned it in passing, but the other thing is, it was often a turnover in leadership that we heard from agencies was the opportunity to take advantage of to start making some of this happen. First there was someone who was not interested, who was maybe putting up roadblocks, not devoting the resources. And then as soon as someone came in who was a lot more open-minded, which I would say is that's the quality that seems to make leadership more supportive, is kind of an open-mindedness, someone who's willing to let people see what's happening in the agency, looking for transparency. If your leader is very afraid and keeps everything guarded because everything might be political or might be really challenging, it's going to be hard to sell a lot of this to them. And unfortunately, there's a few strategies in there to address it, but you are going to be at the mercy of how your leader views this. But one of the things we are planning to develop coming out of this round is some either a one-pager, some guidance, some materials aimed at leadership as the audience that we could share with all of you, and you could either hand them, somehow get, if you get a chance to get 5 minutes on their agenda, that you can put something really quickly in front of them to try and open their mind to what this is all about.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you to all of you who are commenting in the chat as well. Lots of agreement on the importance of having a supportive leadership. So awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. We appreciate it. We are now going to jump into our our topics, we're going to cover some safety, infrastructure condition, reliability, and then even get into some possible future performance or other performance measures. So we're going to hear from several DOTs from around the country. But I'm going to turn the time over now to Ryan. We're going to talk about our first topic of safety. And after Ryan gives a brief overview, we're actually going to have a few poll questions before we get into our presentations. Take it away, Ryan.
Awesome, thank you. Just to piggyback off of what Anna was talking about with performance measures, I was in an awesome training. It's a leadership training up at the University of Utah. I'm a BYU fan, so it kind of hurt to go there a little bit. Unfortunately, they're a rival. But when we were up there, the performance manager, sorry, not the performance manager, the director, the professor that was there, world-renowned Dr. Abb, said that if companies will invest in performance measures or invest in performance management, that they'll be so much further ahead. And he described like 3 or 4 different companies that were using performance measures. And in the end, I hope that the message that he shares every time a new group of, people like myself from the UDOT goes to it, they'll be able to hear that and say, oh, performance measures are important. And they did it with all the leaders within UDOT, and they've heard that same spiel. So it's pretty cool to know that there is someone that's looking out for us small folks in performance management. So just here where it does help to have the voice out there. But safety, different, like I said, safety, we're going to be talking about preserving infrastructure, and the other, scrolling down my list right now, which is optimized mobility is what we call it, but it's performance. What we're looking at with these is when I put this together, when I put the peer exchange together, I looked at some states and I said, you know what, some states have it going. They just know what they're doing. And that's, these people are going to be speaking today, especially on the safety side that I'm doing this introduction for, is these guys know what they're doing. They have safety down. I feel like these states know how to set performance measures. They're already discussing about, targets that they're doing, and they kind of have a good sense of the safety in their graphs. So I don't want to dive into it too much with the safety, because these guys are going to be diving into it a lot already. It's just knowing that the people that are going to be speaking at this were handpicked from my own diving in and doing some research. So just be excited to sit back and listen to these guys. If there's questions you guys have, please put them in the chat box, because it'll help. And these polling questions that we're doing is just some questions that kind of spark interest into what they're going to be talking about. So anyways, safety already on the way. Here it goes. Kick it off. Let's go.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, we are going to pull up just quick poll questions, kind of get us ready and prime for these safety topics. And as Ryan mentioned, as a reminder, after each presenter, we will have a few minutes for Q&A. So feel free, if you have those questions, get ready to share those with us at the end of each presenter. Okay, so we've got these poll questions pulled up. Looks like we are rocking and rolling, getting those answered. We'll give you guys just a minute. Okay, fantastic. So pretty simple, but do you feel this measure is being used to make decisions at your DOT? And great, 85% of you said yes. It's being important. These are important safety measure. Safety, of course, is on top of everybody's mind when a lot of these decisions are being made. And if these performance measures are not being put into use to bring about that safety, not as effective, obviously. So glad to hear that they are being properly utilized, and hopefully we can all learn more today, and those who maybe don't feel that way, we'll take some things away. Okay, how important do you feel this measure is in decision making? So we are pretty close to important and very important, top of the list. Looks like important edges out a little bit. Great, thanks so much. So just kind of wanted to get some ideas, get the ball rolling of kind of where we're all at, where we think of these topics. Perfect. That being said, let's jump into our first presenter on the safety topic. John Milton is going to be with us. He is the Director of Transportation Safety, Quality, and Enterprise Risk for the Washington State DOT. John is a licensed engineer with over 33 years of experience in multimodal safety, design, and traffic operations. He received his Doctor of Philosophy degree from the University of Washington in the United States, where he specialized in road safety and crash severity. He's Safety Section Chair for the Transportation Research Board, Chair of the World Road Association, Technical Committee 3.1 on Road Safety, and Vice Chair for the Committee on Safety for the American Association of the State Highway Transportation Officials. So, John, we are going to turn the time over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk about target setting, particularly as it relates to safety, and give you a little bit of a philosophy of what we think at Washington State about how we set targets. Ultimately, the issue for us, we have a significant amount of debate every year. The safety targets are set on a yearly basis, and they're set with collaboration and communication with the state highway safety offices, as well as working with our partners in the MPOs, RTPOs. That sets up there's a lot of discussion internally about what are we really trying to achieve with target setting, particularly in safety, because when you talk about safety, you are talking about people's lives. The outcome is death and injury, and it's something that is very, very important in many contexts, but it's not necessarily something that will financially immediately impact the department like some of the other target setting areas. So the debate goes on and on and on about that issue. From our perspective, the ultimate goal of any targets, anything that you're doing, is really to reduce fatal and serious crashes. So somebody said something about making it real. Our implementation plan is really where we get at how we are going to set and how we are going to facilitate change within the department. If you're setting targets and it's not creating change, then there's no value in setting those targets. So for us, the importance comes out of what we do to implement change. So when we think about it, target zero, we have an aspirational goal in Washington State of meeting zero by 2030. That's how we set our targets. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. We really, when we think about what we're doing in the safety area, we really are about what change can I bring? What change can I bring to the design manual by what I'm trying to do with safety? If I don't make change in the design manual, not a lot's going to happen in terms of what goes out on the road. If I'm not able to make modification essentially with what is going on in the area of operations, again, I'm not necessarily facilitating the change that I need to go. Our strategic highway plan is our roadmap. And in Washington State, it is bought into. If it's not in our strategic highway plan, it is not going into our safety program. If it's not in our strategic plan, it's not going into our design manuals and other things like that. We value the implementation plan. To us, that is one of the most critical issues that we see in terms of what we're trying to achieve. The implementation plan really spells out in detail what are the specific actions we're going to take, what are the benefits that we see in doing those actions, and what do we need to do first, what do we need to do second to achieve the goals, to achieve the targets. Now, when we think about that, we've set up a couple of different methodologies. Now, we get a lot of complaints about our target setting methodology from some. We accept those. We have a target zero methodology, which I'll show in just a second what that means. Essentially that we've used throughout. Washington State has never met targets. And because in many cases, what we're doing is using the target zero methodology. So the aspirational goal. We recognize that there are penalties associated with that, but really when it comes down to it, target setting is not necessarily about worrying about those penalties. What it's about is facilitating that change that we had talked about. So here's how we set our method. So you can see our trends. Our trends in Washington State are not going in the right direction. Why is it? There's a number of different reasons, and particularly since we've seen a lot of change with COVID, but we've had an upward trend. We did very, very good up until 2013. And then since then, we've been dealing with a lot of different aspects. The state is growing very rapidly, and it is economically changing very quickly. And we're having to deal with those outcomes. But that doesn't mean that that number wouldn't be much higher if we hadn't made change within our program. So this is a target zero methodology, basically our 5-year rolling average. We plot it down to 2030. So that changes every year. Some will set, if you look at this line, you can see that it's increasing. We have a number of states that actually set this as an increasing target. Now think about that. Think about setting a safety as an increasing target. Think about going to a walking or biking and walking discussion and saying, you know, next year I plan to kill 5, 10, 15 more individuals who are walking and biking. It doesn't go over well. Number one, part of what target setting is about communication, being able to communicate to those around you about what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do in terms of your target setting, particularly in the area of safety. The maintenance method, which is going to be seen, I think, quite a bit more, is something where we look at the 5-year rolling average and then we just plot it as a straight line so it doesn't increase. We use this methodology once, but again, we went back to the target zero methodology and we're going to continue that way for quite some time. Our reality is increasing. We want to do something. We've been to the legislature, and let me tell you a little bit about some of what and how we communicated information to the legislature. The first thing that we said is, look, when you look at overall what is happening in Washington State, and you look at the impacts, there's $14 billion of societal impacts using the FHWA methodology. And really, you're only putting a small fraction of money into that program, legislature. Our Secretary of Transportation took this as part of his transportation address and said, there needs to be change. If you look at what we're doing for congestion management, for instance, we're putting a lot of money into a program that really isn't that high in terms of the radar of what that cost is overall to society if you compare it to what's happening in safety. And that, I think, hit a wonderful chord and really started a discussion in the legislature more from, it's not just about mobility projects, but it's about safety projects. And I'll tell you some of the successes in the following slides. Our reality as well in Washington State, we've been dramatically impacted by the downturn that we saw in 2008, but there was also some legislative issues related to taxes. There was a number of different impacts that we had to worry about. And the budget for the safety program has dropped dramatically. We're trying to change that, and we are working with our partners to do that. So we started a whole big discussion essentially with both our MPO and our Strategic Highway Safety Office about what do we need to do? What is it that we are going to do in the future to take bold action to address that increasing target and to change the metric for essentially what is going within that program? These are basically our commitment. We talked about the Highway Safety Implementation Plan, but now we're developing strategic highway safety implementation plans for all the E's and developing an action plan of bold strategies of what we think that the legislature could help us with. We had a discussion with the legislature. What can you do to help us to get to zero? And one of the things that we saw out of our last year's legislation was the complete streets legislation. So any projects over 500,000 have to be in complete streets using the safe system approach for speed setting and for separation. That's huge for us. That's an immense difference. And what is important, that's not the safety program that's doing that. That's all of WSDOT programs. So again, when you go back to what change are you trying to get to? You're trying to get to design and operational change, and being able to fund that as the legislature sees that as an important initiative ultimately is something that you really want to see. So this was a big boon for us. And really, I'll kind of skip over these slides, but when we talk to the legislature, now we're starting a whole different discussion with them about the safe system approach. And we're really breaking it down into two parts to provide separation and to provide kinetic energy. Why are we doing that? Because ultimately, if you want to get to your targets, you have to get others to understand what you're trying to achieve with the solutions that you're building out in the facilities. The other thing that we've had a lot of discussion about in our implementation is it can't be about personal protective equipment as that's going to solve all the problems with behavior. It needs to be something broader than that. We need to get to elimination. If you really want to drive down safety numbers, you need to eliminate the issues that you're seeing out on the road. And that is sometimes addressing DUI type issues by putting guardrail out or whatever it might be. We have to think differently when we're working within safety. Again, it's about self-explaining roads and building in different systems to help facilitate the change that we put into the targets that we put into our performance. Ultimately, if you don't tie it back into performance, if you don't measure what you're doing, you're going to have issues because you can't track what is needed. And we are really pushing hard, developing a decision package about an analysis and evaluation right now, a decision package to get additional funding, because we believe so much in the philosophy that what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. You can't have those discussions. You can't show what the issues are in. It's problematic. It's all anecdotal discussion, and who wins in those discussions? Whoever's making the decision, quite frankly. We don't want to be there. We want to back it up with the data. We want to make everything that we have data driven, and we want to be able to do something differently. The other thing that we got from the legislature last year was a discussion on active transportation and $1.2 billion for active transportation products over the next 16 years. That's an incredible amount. That's just dedicated to active transportation and not including the complete streets legislation, the safe system approach. So you can see for us, there's a lot of positive change that is in store in the very near future. And so with that, I pass it back. And if there's any questions, I'll take them. Or if we can wait.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Yep, we do have just a minute. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. Let's see, Benjamin, it looks like your hand is raised. Did you have a question for us? Okay, well, with that, thank you, John. We appreciate that. I really loved, this approach with target setting. I think it's so easy to think target setting is just making those goals, having the numbers, hitting those targets. But I love the idea of looking at it from the mindset of how do we use these targets to facilitate the change we need and implementing those aspirational targets to make that happen. So thank you so much. And now our next presenter is Beverly Quinlan. She's a senior analyst with the Virginia Department of Transportation. Beverly has worked in transportation planning and performance management in Virginia since 2013. She specializes in GIS, data management, and automation. And with that, Beverly, please feel free to take it away.
Thank you. Let me just get my screen shared. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks for having me today. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about how Virginia is linking data-driven target setting to performance-based planning and programming. First, I want to give you a little background about Virginia. Virginia is the third largest DOT. A little over half of our road miles are in urban areas, and a little less than half are in rural areas. The bulk of the population of Virginia is focused on the eastern half of the state, while the western half is very rural. So we're a very diverse state. We have a lot of lane miles, and only 13% of those are on the NHS, which has a big impact on how we interpret the application of the federal measures. Unlike a lot of states, we have what's called a Commonwealth Transportation Board, and that board is an entity that adopts our federal targets, and they also make decisions about funding for our 6-year improvement program. I work in the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, and we're responsible for the Long Range Transportation Plan. We call it VTRANS, a project prioritization process called Smart Scale, and in addition to performance management. We're charged with evaluating and monitoring performance to inform investment and policy decisions. And in doing that, we work closely with UDOT and Department of Rail and Public Transportation, as well as other agencies in the Transportation Secretariat. So when staff first presented about federal transportation performance management to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the board challenged staff to develop data-driven methods to establish targets. The board wanted to understand how the system was working. They wanted us to identify and examine trends, determine the impact of current investment strategies on performance and how those would impact our targets. And they wanted us to use these data-driven methods to recommend targets for the board to adopt. So in this presentation, I'm going to highlight 2 performance areas where Virginia is using a data-driven approach to target setting. And that the first is safety and the other is reliability, but there are other ongoing efforts. So in 2019, VDOT's Traffic Engineering Division completed work on 3 statistical models for target setting for safety. This graph shows you basically the difference between targets and performance. You can see our targets are these sort of point features and the performance are the lines. So beginning in 2019, the board started adopting targets using this model-based approach. So the models include a variety of factors that influence the number of crashes. And you can see this chart just sort of gives you an idea of the types of factors that are included in the model. Every year, new data is examined to see if it should be added to the models. Sometimes a factor is determined to not be significant, so it's removed from the model. So every year the models are, refreshed with data, refreshed in terms of looking at what factors are being considered and if new data sources have become available. So the model output is basically the baseline of numbers of expected crashes for the performance period. So the next step after we have that model that tells us, well, this is how many crashes we expect to have. Next, we look at the program projects that are expected to be completed during the performance period. And those projects are evaluated and the anticipated crash reductions are calculated. And this last year, there were about 200 projects that were reviewed. So once those projects are reviewed, the crash reductions calculated, those reductions are subtracted from the model baseline, and that is what we use as our target. So that's our target, whatever the model predicted minus the reductions expected from the program projects, and then we have our targets. So that's kind of like the mechanics of how we set the targets. But the important thing were the insights that we gained from this process. So we already knew that systemic safety projects were the most cost-effective projects. But what this process really highlighted, particularly to our decision makers, was just how much of an advantage it was to spend money on systemic projects instead of spot projects. And just sort of seeing those numbers in black and white for Virginia, not theoretical, just had a huge impact on the decision makers and has led to a lot of changes. So some of the changes have been legislative changes. There's been a lot of changes to direct how investments are chosen in Virginia to, instead of funding as many spot improvements, now many more systemic improvements are funded. And there's a schedule for completing those improvements across the state. We've also had a lot of changes to policy and the planning process. So now those types of improvements are considered more heavily during the planning process. So there's been a lot of positive change. Another one, if you notice, one of the factors that we considered in the model were behavioral program spending. And while this is not a DOT program in Virginia, it's the Department of Motor Vehicles is in charge of behavioral spending programs. We've seen a lot more coordination between the different agencies for how money is spent to produce the best outcome. So there's been just so many positive outcomes and changes from this data-driven process that, you know, kind of have nothing to do with the targets. It's just the insights that were gained, and the data-driven process has just been a wonderful communication tool, particularly for our decision makers. So while the safety model has been in use for several years, we're just starting a similar process for reliability. So for interstate reliability, for the first performance period, we evaluated several approaches and ended up using an approach that really just looked at increase in vehicle miles traveled. That process didn't consider weather, work zones, other factors that would influence reliability. So for the second performance period, the UDOT Traffic Engineering Division has developed a model for interstate reliability that includes 30 different independent variables. They found some of the most significant are volume to capacity ratio, percent heavy vehicles, and on down to less significant variables like safety service patrol and terrain type. So the model is a machine learning algorithm, and it uses a random forest model. There's actually been a recent presentation, I should have a link, but the recent presentation in the TPM webinar series on this model if you're more interested. But the data was prepared for the 30 independent variables and split into training data and testing data. And there was a very small error between predicted versus actual, that reserve data. And one important thing to mention about this model is it doesn't actually predict a statewide reliability number. It predicts whether each segment will be reliable or not. Once we realized, so we had a good model, very small difference, very small error, we put in some future year assumptions and have developed targets for the second performance period with this method. And so we hope that the outcome from this, we hope will be like the outcome from our safety process, where we saw so many other benefits, so many positive outcomes that help shape our policy and planning and programming process. We hope that we will be able to use this reliability model to see for that same, huge sphere of benefits and not just for the process, but benefits and outcomes for Virginia. And I have, if you're more interested about these specific processes and models, I have some contacts here for those. And I guess that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Beverly. And especially thank you. Beverly actually kind of stepped in last minute to present for another member of her DOT who was slated to present with us. So thank you so much for stepping in on such short notice. Great job. Any questions for Beverly before we move on to our next topic? Okay, great. And we will have all of these presentations available for everybody as well in the follow-up. But thank you so much, Beverly. We are going to move now into the topic of infrastructure condition. So I'm going to turn the time over again to Ryan to introduce that topic for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the safety presentations. Those were awesome. Infrastructure, it's like a heart. I say the infrastructure, my heart hurts a little bit because this is what keeps us going. This is what moves us around the state. Our next presenter, the reason I reached out to the Connecticut DOT was just because of the way that they have structured their infrastructure, especially their bridges and the way that they're doing their bridges. I don't want to steal his thunder because I know he's going to do a great job. But infrastructure is a really big topic of discussion recently within the nation, within DOTs, especially with the new administration passing out the new infrastructure bill that will give lots of monies to all of us. And now we need to figure out a way to properly use that and use our performance metrics to do that. So super excited for this next section. Infrastructure is a very key part to keeping states moving. So without any hesitation, I'm excited for the Connecticut DOT, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And we are just going to do a quick poll question here, and then we will move on into our presenter. So kind of same as last time, you'll see those poll questions pop up. Give everybody a minute to answer. Okay, we've got those pulled up. So first question is, do you think your DOT is able to connect these measures with people doing the work? And then our second question, do you feel these measures truly reflect the condition of the assets in your state?
I better preface those two. These are related to the federal measures.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, everybody, just a second here to respond. Okay, we may be having a few technical difficulties on these. I am gonna pick on Edgardo again. He says he answered yes to question 2, but they are hard to connect to the actual action needs, which is a great point. And I think, it's opportunities like this for all the states to come together and connect and learn from each other and have these measures obviously for a purpose. But if you can't really connect them to the people who are implementing and affecting these measures and these results and the actions, it's an important part of that. So apologize for that. We will see what we can do on our end to get those results to you. Okay. let us move in now to our next presenter, Edgardo, who I'm just picking on. So now you really get to hear from him. Edgardo is the Transportation Supervising Engineer at the Connecticut DOT. He has over 27 years of experience in the pavement management and performance management areas at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. He's an active TRB volunteer, both in NCH ARP as well as the TRB standing committees. And he's also a lecturer at the Central Connecticut State University. So Edgardo is keeping very busy. Let me go ahead and turn the time over to him.
I hope you can all see the slide. If you can.
It's not coming up yet. I can see you, but not the slides.
Okay. We just practiced before 10 o'clock. So I have my apologies. Let's see.
We understand. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much you practice. There we go. It's coming up now.
Okay. And I'll switch to presenter view. So good morning to everybody west of Greenland. So if you're listening from east of Greenland, good afternoon. I'm sure it's open to everybody around the world. But you know, on infrastructure condition, just before I get started, I want to mention that we have done great work here tying our target setting process to our management systems in both bridge and pavement. And we could talk about that, but I think it would take a little longer. But if you want offline to figure out how we integrate those things, please feel free to contact us at Connecticut DOT. But what I want to talk about today is something that seems a lot more down to earth and simple. And I think it's a great example of how a performance measure allows you to make a change at your agency. And again, I'm not a bridge expert. I'm more of the pavement side, but you know, I am involved in performance management. And this is a particularly good story that predates MAP 21 and the national measures. It's just organically how we got action and response out of a performance measure. So a brief history of performance management at the DOT. I'm not going to say that we invented the wheel. We didn't. People were talking about performance management and TPM framework well before MAP 21 was enacted. So here at the DOT, the executive started an initiative that resulted in the first performance report in 2009. And we've continued reporting quarterly until the present time. And we were trying to focus on agency performance. Without national performance measures, we're trying to tell our own story. It spanned all areas of the DOT. It is public facing to this day. It's governed by a standing committee representing top leadership in the agency. So we're organized into bureaus. So every bureau chief is there. The executive team is there, and they could sit down quarterly and talk about the business, the actual overall picture in terms of how we're doing. And there is great executive champion for this activity. And what happens is leaders, this has been our mechanism for our state ones, own their own measures, and they have to answer these 4 basic questions. You know, what the measure is, why is it important, how we're doing, and what are we doing about it? And to this day, that's the narrative that they have to be able to put out to the public and own. So we meet quarterly in a yearly cycle of evaluating which performance measures we should take on. I wanted to also include a celebrity slide. So here's Christos Xenophontos, who is one of the people driving the performance management initiatives in the country. And but because there are 3 dimensions to performance management that are classified into M's for communication purposes, and it's measuring, managing, and messaging. And I think I've heard about all 3 and how they connect. If you have this framework, which is very easy to remember, when you hear people like John or people like Anna or Beverly, who just spoke on the topic of Ryan or Kelly, and you see this framework, you understand, oh, they're talking about, this is about the importance of communicating. This is about managing. Sometimes it's about, having a view into the process through the data. I'm going to also introduce a taxonomy. I find these classification systems I developed ones that to help me look at a very complex issue. So there's no literature search on this. This is just 3 things I've noticed when people pick performance measures. There are the ones we get at training. You take NHI course on performance management, and they start you off with a SMART framework, to what makes a good performance measure. Infrastructure condition, I think, is one of these. Achievement measures are ones where if you are not ready or don't have the insight into your process or the data, you can still start being transparent and show some accountability by having achievement measures. So how much we spend on bike and ped projects. If you're doing a system inventory, the percent of completion, are you on time? Are you on budget towards a new initiative? And then there are these that are gap measures. And I'm not going to use this example, although the one I'm talking about is also a gap measure. But I think the greatest way to frame it was just John Milton and the zero that's target setting process, where you are highlighting an area in need of attention. You're not ignoring it. So I'll talk about what makes that work next. So, in true performance, you're trying to express and describe reality as best as you can, and they should relate to the long-term vision. We heard that everything has to relate back to the long-range plans and the vision that everybody's bought into. That's kind of key. And then you set targets and monitor your actions toward achieving them. With these, what I call achievement targets, you can call them anything you want. This is just based on why you would start reporting on something and then how it plays out. Provide transparency and accountability, report on progress, and also message. Sometimes you want to show how much you're doing, so to garner support with stakeholders. And you want to react to deviations from expectations. If you start the performance is not matching, then you want to have a quick reaction. Gap measures, allow you to, like, zero deaths is perfect. You highlight the gap and you react and correct. And the important thing here for this to work is a commitment to address it by leadership, and then actually starting to close the gap. The commitment is key, because otherwise it just looks, you just decided to show how badly you do something, and if you don't do anything about it. So the fact that it's public facing really helps you get out there. Now I'm going to talk about bridge, a great story that we have about bridge maintenance measures. So, our system is a little older than the national average in terms of when our bridges were built, and we have, in their conditions, we're not that great, but we're getting better. And we maintain 5,429 total bridges in Connecticut, state maintained. And the NHS, the ones that are included in the National Performance Measure, are just a fraction of those. So we are very focused on keeping all our bridges from falling, and as many of them in good condition as possible. So for us, the number of bridges is as important as the deck area, which is in the national measure. So only 1,807 out of the 5,427 are actually in the NHS, and you can see the breakdown. Here's a link before. You just Google Connecticut Highway Asset Fact Sheets. We have these great one-pagers synthesizing everything on the asset management front that shows the condition. So, the Connecticut is hilly, even though the mountains are not tall. It's very hard to get around without building a bridge somewhere. And we had a very unfortunate fatality on the I-95, a bridge collapse on I-95 near the border with New York on a very heavily traveled section with some fatalities. So there is a culture and an interest. When people think of transportation in Connecticut, the first thing they want to know is, are the bridges safe? Because in the collective memory, this is still talked about. And out of that came systems to ensure that we don't miss maintenance and rehabilitation needs and that they're communicated within the agency. This happened basically in concept without a digital revolution. So these bridge maintenance memoranda are official memos of an inspection that create work items for bridge maintenance or rehabilitation, so they go to the right office. And of course, over time, it's been built into a workflow management system. So when we were setting up the performance measures back in 2009, we had one for condition, which was a % of the state maintained bridges based on number, not the deck area, in a state of good repair. I think if you look at our 10 largest bridges, they take 20% of the deck area. So if you just focus on that, you can look like you're making great progress. And then there can be a problem hidden under the surface of one of these little bridges that we have all over the place. And that is, I believe, a true performance measure in terms of describing, performance of that's how we're looking at how well we're doing our job. But in bridge maintenance, we came up with two coupled measures. One is the number of bridge work items generated by these memos that are completed, and then the backlog. And these became first an achievement on the work items completed. It says, hey, look how much we do. And the gap is the backlog. So this created a situation where you have a story that sort of conflicts. So when we started measuring, I've cut off the first 8 quarters, because the inspection cycle is 2 years. So a lesson for us was aggregation is very important, because if you look at each quarter's result, the number fluctuates quite a bit and it's hard to see the underlying trends. But here, it's clear to see that you had work items completed in this period here, but the backlog, that purple line, which is over index on the right, was not dropping. It was actually increasing before this, and then we started to pay attention to it, and then did some process improvements and kind of was holding on with that backlog. But it wasn't a great story to tell. Even though we're doing more work, the backlog is not dropping. And that allowed the units, after working very hard to do things within existing resources, to justify additional bridge maintenance crews. And now the link to performance management is that this was seen by everybody in the department. At some point, even though we were just focusing on reporting and starting to show and tell our story, people around the room started to say, why can't we get this number down? This is not good. The backlog is not dropping, and it caused us to react. So this acted like a gap measure. Work on it as best as you can, and you still see that you need to make a better improvement, and then you add extra resources. You're doing the best you can. We need more. This is not budgeting. And all of a sudden you see the drop, a subsequent drop. So here's a Twitter shout out. So how it started, how it's going is a common meme over there. So if you look, this is our window on performance on our dashboard. So, the other one includes a little bit of the history, but we kind of think this 5-year time frame is enough to see the performance. And we made progress on bridge items completed up to a certain point. And then basically, I think it coincides with the pandemic that you start to see a drop in the work number included. So that's something to monitor that you can react to. And of course, pretty soon the backlog starts to rise. So there's something that needs to be reviewed at the present time. So a great story in terms of accomplishing the measure. It was a gap measure. When it's fixed, it becomes something that tells you whether you're keeping up with it. And then now there's probably a need to review and see whether we need to keep an eye on that backlog. The important thing is that because leadership was involved and they looked at the process without really focusing too much on, everybody's got a reason why they can't do what they need to do. And I'm sure the executive gets tired of listening to that. I need more staff, I need more resources, but the numbers don't lie. So if the number is not moving and you need it to move down, you react, and then everybody gets on board. And because you have an integrated look into the agency's business, you can actually make a difference. Very simple story. It's not a new prediction model. It's a way of tracking performance to make an actual change. So they highlighted the potential issue. And this is basically, I just ran through this slide. It became a success story for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And that's what I wanted to bring today. A simple, easy to digest, practical application of performance measures that are not necessarily the national ones or the latest and greatest. It's just using them to affect real change in the organization. I'll leave my thank you for your attention. I'll, whenever there are questions, I'll be happy to take them. And here's my email in case you want to email me. And I'll stop sharing at this point. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Edgardo, for sharing. I really appreciate, you bringing in the real life example. And unfortunately, a bridge collapse is never a good thing, but even how far long ago that happened, it's still a major part of the history of your state and kind of fuels a lot of those decisions, a lot of those performance measures. It's great to have these measures, but even better to remember the why of these measures, the why of why you do what you do. So any questions for Edgardo before we move on to our next topic? Okay,
maybe just a comment for me. Asset management is a key to this, knowing your condition of your assets. I mean, we've been working on that at Utah for quite a while. We're in our second tier level assets right now, still gathering information, details of those items. So yeah, you got to have that to have success in where you're going. You got to know the condition of your assets. So this is the key where TPM and asset management work well together.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. All right, we are going to move on to our next topic of reliability. So once again, I'm going to turn the time over to Ryan to introduce that topic for us. We have another poll question, then we'll get into our next presenters.
Awesome, thank you. Reliability, this section is one that I wouldn't say gives me the most heartburn, but maybe does. I better be careful what I say because you never know who's on the call, but it definitely is one of those that we look at federal performance measures and the way they track reliability and the way that we're doing our metrics to calculate for reliability. And there's a lot of gray area in there, especially within our state. We've noticed that we're looking at this quite heavily and seeing if there were some other ways to calculate this in the right way. Now, truck travel time reliability, that one's pretty easy to digest, but definitely this is a sensitive area within Utah State DOT. And I'm super excited for the presenters on this one to present on it, especially the Colorado DOT definitely has some great insight of what they're doing there. Talking with Jacob, I don't want to steal his thunder, but they have a great way of tracking it and the way they do business there. So each state is required to talk about reliability, is required to do different measures on that. There's not just the truck reliability, there's reliability in general about how to get across from one state and how easy the state uses that, as well as the states have a lot of flexibility in creating these reliability metrics. So not every state is built the same. When I was looking through each state's reliability measures, they don't all track them the same. So I'm excited to hear a little bit from Colorado and move forward and go from there. Just as a heads up with everybody, we have reliability, we have future models, which we're looking at for future ones, and then we are done. So we might be wrapping up a little bit earlier than the actual time frame says, but just stay with us. I feel like this is a very important topic to jump into, is reliability. So with that, Aaron, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. So short and simple, but important question here on reliability. Do you feel these measures correlate to the work that needs to be done? We'll give everybody just a minute to answer. And then Kaylee from our team, if you will share those results with us. All right, sorry about that, guys. We're having some technical difficulties with our polls. You know, like Edgardo and I mentioned, doesn't matter how much you practice, sometimes the joys of technical difficulties, but just keep that in mind as we move on. You know, again, we have these measures, but how are we really correlating them to the work? Okay, and with that, we have our next presenter is Jacob Kirschner. He's our performance analyst with the Colorado Department of Transportation. So our friends here right next door. Jacob graduated from Metropolitan State University of Denver with a bachelor's degree in geography. He works closely with various subject matter experts throughout the Colorado DOT to help implement performance measures, to identify areas of improvement and bring strategic vision to CDOT's investment decisions. Jacob is assisted with establishing performance metrics at the state and federal level, including establishing PM2 and PM3 targets for the second performance evaluation period of the national performance measures. In addition to establishing performance measures, Jacob is a huge fan of the Denver Broncos, and that pained me to read that. So that being said, Jacob, let's turn the time over to you.
You able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the introduction, Aaron. Good morning and/or good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Jacob Kirschner, and I'm the performance analyst for the Colorado Department of Transportation. Today, I will be presenting on how CDOT used predictive analytics and novel data sets to predict and forecast, or to forecast and establish targets for the second performance evaluation period for PM3 national performance. Given we are only entering the second performance period of the national performance measures, establishing data-driven targets that are both realistic and achievable can prove to be difficult. Many DOTs have established effective procedures to establish PM2 infrastructure targets, but what about PM3 system reliability targets? And you know, hands up here, CDOT's first performance period targets, we proved to be all over the place. Some of our targets showed to be very realistic. Others proved to be not so realistic. Going into the second performance period, CDOT determined we needed to develop a new way to establish targets for PM3. And that brings me into today's conversation, how CDOT set data-informed, realistic, and achievable targets using predictive analytics. Predictive analytics is the use of data, statistical algorithms, and machine learning techniques to identify the likelihood of future outcomes based on historical data. The goal is to go beyond knowing what has happened to providing a best assessment of what will happen in the future. Weather forecasting is one of the best known uses of predictive modeling. Predictive analytics also is used to forecast elections, predict the spread of diseases, and model the effects of climate change. Given the emerging usage of predictive analytics, CDOT saw this as an opportunity to develop and establish data-driven PM3 targets using a predictive model. Using predictive modeling, CDOT established level of travel time reliability targets, truck travel time targets, and peak hour of excessive delay targets. I want to start off by just giving a high-level overview of how a predictive model works, and then we're going to jump into an example of how CDOT took these steps to develop a predictive model for system reliability targets. First step is to define your objective and indicators. In this case, the objective was very easy to find. We want to forecast 2 and 4-year targets for PM3. Next, you need to define your indicators. Ask yourself what data elements and variables are key to measuring system reliability. Is that data readily available? Is it accessible and easy to extract? Ensuring you know what you want to measure and how you will measure it is a crucial first step. The next step in predictive modeling is to collect and process the data. You need to determine your data sources and then process the data into a workable form. Following data collection and processing step, you need to explore your data. It's important to perform initial investigations on the data to ensure that you're working with quality data. After the exploratory analysis, you need to decide on a model. There are numerous types of modeling approaches, and and it is important you select a model that best fits your defined objective. Often, several different model approaches may be evaluated and compared before selecting a final model. Next step is to train and validate your model. Does your model consistently perform as well as you expect it to? And so this is oftentimes where you'll go back to step 4. You need to evaluate several models to see which one performed the best. Finally, after deciding on the best performing model and validating the results, you can deploy your objective, or in this case, establish PM3 targets. Now that I've given a high-level overview of how a predictive model works, let's examine each step more closely. I'm going to present a step-by-step process on how CDOT established system reliability targets using a predictive model. First, as I just briefly touched on, CDOT started by defining the objective. The objective being state DOTs are required to establish 2- and 4-year system reliability targets. Once you've defined your objective, the next step is to define the indicators. In this case, CDOT developed a list of variables that affect system reliability. The first variables we defined were easy to pick out. We used variables that were a part of the system reliability calculations. This includes travel time, roadway travel segments, annual average daily traffic, and occupancy factors. But dive deeper and ensure we consider other factors that may affect system reliability, we investigated CDOT's travel demand model. And so from CDOT's travel demand model, we also incorporated point data, population data, and long distance travel estimates into the model. Point data consists of 2015, 2030, and 2045 spatial data, which shows the location of establishments, schools, and homes in the state of Colorado. Population estimates were also used at the county level. This was to ensure we were examining population growth at a more micro level rather than state growth. Finally, we incorporated long distance travel time estimates. At this point, CDOT has determined we have included all the data in the model that is readily available and accessible. Now that we have collected the data, it's time to prepare the data. Predictive models require data be in a format of columns and rows, where each row is a unique observation and each column describes something about the observation. In this use case, each row represents a single TMC segment in a single year. Columns are either predictors, features, or a target. Predictors and features describe each observation of the event or the process that we're modeling. Targets are the value we are trying to predict. At the bottom of the slide here, I have a basic example of how the prepared data would look. Each row is a TMC defined by a single year, and each column includes predictors to describe system reliability. The next step is critical to ensuring that you have good data. Once you've collected and prepared your data, you need to do an exploratory analysis. An exploratory analysis is the process of performing initial investigations on data to discover patterns, spot anomalies, test hypotheses, and to check assumptions with the help of summary statistics and graphical representations. When CDOT was investigating the system reliability data, CDOT observed an anomaly in the non-interstate reliability data. After further investigation, it was determined that a new third-party vendor took responsibility of measuring travel time for NPM RDS. For interstate and truck reliability measurements, this had no noticeable impact. But for non-interstate reliability, this changed significantly, with the statewide non-interstate reliability measure jumping from 63.8% in 2016 to 85.9% in 2017. Failure to account for this vendor change would have resulted in overpredicting non-interstate values. Had we skipped the exploratory analysis, we would have wasted important staff time developing models with flawed data. Once again, it is crucial to ensure that you have good data. Following the exploratory analysis, the next step is to determine a model. I wanted to include this slide as it explains the different types of models CDOT used to evaluate performance. Each model has its own pros and cons, and it's up to the user to determine the best model fit for your desired outcome. Since this is only a 15-minute presentation, I'm going to skip over this slide. However, later in the presentation, I will touch on the random forest and decision tree model in more detail, as this is the model we use to forecast PM3. Next step is to train and validate the model. In order to estimate the performance of predictive models, data is split into data sets for training and for testing. Real-world activities rarely follow a well-defined formula that can be used to predict an outcome. Actual system reliability values depend on many different variables, such as the behavior of individual drivers interacting with one another, navigating construction, weather, poor drivers, etc. This is called noise. To account for this, test sets are withheld from data when training a model. The test set is then applied to the model in order to estimate the actual performance on a data set with different noise. The chart on the right illustrates the performance of the predictive model CDOT used to forecast future travel time reliability. Because these models are used for statewide measures as well as for the 5 different MPOs in Colorado, models were evaluated based on their performance in these 6 different regions. Random forest models generally perform the best across the board. And so a random forest is a model that uses many individual decision trees trained on subsets of data. But before we get into what a random forest is, we first need to understand what a decision tree is. A decision tree is a model that splits data into separate branches based on the value of predictors until data is grouped into highly similar leaves. In the example above, the highly similar leaves are unreliable or reliable. The decision tree goes through each branch and makes a yes or no decision based on the data input to the model. This process is done for every TMC segment by every single year so that the model can learn and teach itself on what future may look like based on historical data. Now that we know what a decision tree is, a random forest is a tree-based machine learning algorithm that leverages the power of multiple decision trees for making decisions. As the name suggests, it's a forest of trees. But why do we call it a random forest? That's because it is a forest of randomly created decision trees. Each node in the decision tree works on a random subset of futures to calculate the output. The random forest then combines the output of the individual decision trees to generate the final output. In general, for large data sets, random forests tend to be more accurate since the model is trained on different subsets of data. When considering a predictive model, CDOT looks for accuracy as well as robustness. Does our model consistently perform as well as we expect it to? After deciding on using a random forest to model system reliability, the models were put to a test. Models were trained on data prior to 2019 and then tested on 2019 data in order to estimate performance. 3-year predictions are an experiment where 2019 reliability is predicted based on available in 2016. 5-year predictions are an experiment where 2019 reliability is predicted based on data available in 2014. The table below illustrates how closely the model was to predicting the actual 3- and 5-year reliability. As you can see in the 3- and 5-year error column, the models were very accurate in predicting future reliability. CDOT staff was especially impressed with the accuracy of the 3-year prediction for non-interstate system reliability, which was within 0.005 of a decimal point. So finally, we've reached the last step in predictive modeling. It's time to deploy the data and establish 2- and 4-year system reliability targets. I'm going to use the percent of person miles traveled on the interstate that are reliable as an example of how CDOT established targets using predictive modeling. Graph represents historical level of travel time reliability in blue and the predictive model results in the orange dotted line. To account for any inaccuracies that might underlie the predictive model, Staff used a confidence level within 95% of the predictive model results to create a cone of confidence. The cone of confidence creates an upper threshold and a lower threshold of expected results. The upper threshold results are represented by the green dotted line, and the lower threshold is the red dotted line. Current predictive modeling suggests that reliable travel on Colorado interstates will be above levels seen before the pandemic throughout this performance period. However, CDOT staff decided to use the lower threshold to give ourselves a small cushion on the model results due to the uncertainties of traffic patterns resulting from COVID. Using the lower threshold, CDOT is forecasting a 2-year target of 81%, a 4-year target of 79% of person miles traveled on the interstate that are reliable. And so, great part of the predictive model is that CDOT has created it in a way that additional data can be added and the model can be rerun. In 2 years, when the FHWA mid-performance period progress report is due and targets can be adjusted, CDOT will have 2 additional years of data to rerun the model and reevaluate our 4-year targets. This concludes my presentation. I want to thank you for your time. If you have any additional questions or would like more detailed information regarding the target established methodology, please feel free to reach out to me. I've also attached the contact information for the consultant we worked with to develop the predictive models. Are there any questions I can address right now?
Thank you so much, Jacob. We appreciate you sharing great information on reliability and forecasting and data modeling. So much appreciated. We are going to move into our next topic here. Just kind of some out of the box performance measures, some future and other measures. So I'm going to turn the time over once more to Ryan.
There we go. I'm back. All right. Super excited for this next section. This section is how to describe it other than just one of my favorite ones to talk about, just because the performance measures have been around for a while, but there is the opportunity for us to start looking outside the box, to think of ways that we can, try to create new things, or if we are doing something different, to share those ideas. A good one was on the screen right now is about emission reductions. This was something that was brought on that a lot of people thought, why are we worrying about emissions? Well, you can see the effects that are taking place currently right now. So with that, we have 2 DOTs that will be sharing some information going forward. Again, we have Colorado going at it, different information coming from their group, as well as we have Texas on the line with us. So super excited for both these presentations. Excited to hear about new ideas that are coming out. And then as well as if you have some stuff that you're using, don't be afraid to drop it in the chat box and we can follow up with you guys on it later. So without any further ado, let's go forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. So as Ryan mentioned, we have Colorado DOT represented again with us. So we appreciate all of their support and participation. Next up, we're going to hear from Elena Farhati. Elena is a traffic operations and technology engineer with the Colorado Department of Transportation. She received her BS from Kent State University and her MSc in civil engineering from Louisiana State University. Elena is a problem solver. Her work on traffic engineering projects often reflects this passion. She brings innovative and pragmatic solutions to her team and clients. Some of her areas of expertise are traffic and operations safety study, corridor and interchange improvement analysis, traffic signal timing, traffic impact study, a transportation management plan, maintenance of traffic simulation and modeling, and preparing and reviewing plans, specifications, and estimates. So very well-rounded breadth of expertise there with Elena. So thank you so much, Elena, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. As introduced, my name is Elena Farhati, and I am a traffic operation and technology engineer with the CDOT at the Traffic Safety and Engineering Services branch at the headquarters. So today, I am presenting an ongoing project with the CDOT headquarters at the latter phase entitled Operational Level of Service Tool. And let me share my screen real quick. Okay. Share. Can, well, can you see my screen now?
Not seeing it yet, Elena.
Okay, well, I don't know why it's not showing me that option, Erin.
Well, we can see if we can get it pulled up on our end. Give us just a second. Okay, there we go. We got it up and running for you, Elena. If you'll just kind of cue us when you want us to move to slides, we'll get it run for you.
All right, yeah, so if you could move on to the second slide to the agenda, that'd be great, Erin. Okay, so in this presentation, sorry, trying to get this out of my way. In this presentation, I go over the definition of OLS, operational level of service, and give some example of the use cases, data set, and methodology that were used in developing this tool. Some short overview of the OLS dashboard and the performance measures and targets that were used to develop this tool. Next slide, please. So here are some key terms that we used or referenced during the analysis and development of this OLS tool. I'm not going to go over them, but it's there if we want to go back and check it out. Next slide, Erin. So I'm going to start with the definition of the OLS and some examples of the current use cases that we have on our dashboard. Next slide, Erin. Thank you. Well, OLS is what is OLS? It's a method to evaluate the performance of a roadway facility at Colorado compared to the similar facilities statewide. It uses speed and volume data to report how that roadway segment is performing in terms of the expected travel time and the planning time index. The planning time index is a performance measure that presents several roadway characteristics and provides a holistic performance measure for travel time reliability. LOS requires that the road, vehicles, and infrastructure receive and transmit, the data to feed into our calculation for the LOS, and then it shows where the PTI of that monitored roadway, where it's higher than normal or average on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. The outcome then help users determine the reliability of transportation network. Our OLS outcome is an interactive dashboard with a mapping tool that I'm going to go over briefly in the next slide. So next slide, please, Erin. So this LOS web tool initially started with 6 use cases in phase 1, including bottleneck scores, event-based delays, and policy directive 14 as our performance measures and targets. As a part of phase 2, we're looking at expanding the dashboard to include more use cases such as work zone lane closure analysis. And with this use case, we are going to provide visual representation of operating conditions of the corridor and that how lane closure would affect the roadway network. The next slide shows screenshots of some of the use cases that we currently have at our OLOS dashboard. Use case 1 in this example identifies congested segments and bottlenecks on interstates and highways. PTI 4 in here, I wish I could point out to my screen, but on the right side, PTI for this specific monitored roadway is reported as almost over 4, a little over 4, and that means that a peak hour trip on this segment of the roadway take almost 4 times of a free flow travel time. Meaning the higher the PTI, the more unreliable the segment travel time is. And as you can see, it's translated to on a bottom left side. It's translated as an operational level of service of 4. The next slide. It's a screenshot of the second use case in our dashboard, and it provides operational analysis of the roadway segments in 3 ways: by facility type, as shown on the top bar, by model type, and by volume. Query by facility type includes freeway and highway in phase 1, and as a part of enhancement for phase 2, we're going to include arterials and local roads in our network. Query by model type includes 12 roadway facility types in Colorado, and the query by volume include high volume versus low volume segments. And these are on the right are some of the screenshots of each of the functions within use case 2. The next slides reports a comparison between OLOS, which is the operational level of service, and the loss, which is the level of service of safety for the corridor. So as like in this example, this segment of the eastbound, I can't say of the eastbound of this segment of the roadway is reported with an OLOS level 4, with a level of service of safety of 3. The PTI 4.7 again means that it takes almost twice as much as free flow travel time. The next slide visualizes the use case 4 in our dashboard, and it kind of shows the travel time reliability impact from 4 types of non-recurrent congestions: work zone or construction, incident, weather event, and special events. This specific example shows the travel time trajectory for the monitored work zone between July and September of 2021. On the top right picture or graph, the white line represents the baseline travel time, and the orange graph shows the average travel time in 5 minutes intervals. So where I pointed out with a red arrow, it shows that the average change in travel time was recorded as 13 seconds, or an increase of 8% versus the baseline, the average baseline. The next slide shows use case 6 of our OLOS. Under use case 6, targets and goals were identified as a part of the policy directive 14, which provide statewide measurable performance targets and goals. These measures all provide a quantifiable way to evaluate the overall performance of the network. In this example, in 2020, we can see that the overall network has met the performance measure targets that was set for this network. And I'm going to go back to it later on in more details. So in the next section, I am going to talk a little bit about the OLOS data set, the data set that were used to develop the OLOS tool, and I'm going to touch a little on the methodology behind this OLOS. The 5 years of data were fed into OLOS. Phase 1 covers 5 years of data up to 2019, and we're going to include 2020 and 2021 data in the next phase of DLOS. Phase 1 only included interstates and highways. In the analysis, as a part of phase 2, arterials and local roads are also to be included, which means that we may want to bring in more data set or data resources to our calculation. Currently, OLOS uses the INRIX data to get CDOT road network and RADIUS data to get the TMC's files. So in the next slide, so we are using INRIX and RADIUS, as I said, and we're looking into other data sources like Waze or Streetlight or WeHo to see if we can take advantage of those data sets to include more data coverage temporally and spatially. In the next slide, I am going to talk a little about the methodology that we used. So as briefly discussed, the performance metric used to report the OLOS is per planning time index or PTI, and PTI defines as a ratio of 95th percentile peak hour travel time versus the free flow travel time. For example, a PTI of 2 means that a 30-minute trip in a free flow condition would take 60 minutes during the peak hour. And as I mentioned previously, the higher the PTI, the more unreliable the roadway segment travel time would be. So OLOS was broken down into 4 levels or grades, level 1 through 4, with level 1, OLOS referring to a low potential candidate for congestion reduction strategies, meaning that the road is almost in good operational condition, whereas the level 4 represent a high potential candidate for congestion reduction strategies. I'm going to move on to the OLOS dashboard. The next slide, Erin, please. Okay, well. Okay, so I changed the slides a little bit here. Okay, so. Okay. So I think I covered that, Erin. If you want to move on to section 3. And it's not the most updated version, Erin, sorry. Go down for the next couple of slides. Sorry. So go down until the next section. Yeah, go down. I took them out because it was more in detail of the calculations. But yes. So the next slide shows a screenshot of the dashboard that we have. I included a link to the dashboard. I was going to show it, but I think I'm just going to skip it for the sake of being on time. So section 4, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about the performance measures and targets that were set for DLOS analysis and dashboard. Next slide, please. So OLOS targets and goals were identified as part of the Policy Directive 14 for OLOS. PD 14 provides performance goals and objective measures in 3 key areas: safety, asset management, and mobility. Mobility being the focus of this study. In the next slide, shown, the FAST Act of 2015 requires all state DOTs to set targets on and report annually on metrics related to safety, infrastructure condition, and system performance. Under system performance, reliability of interstate highway and non-highway system is measured by level of travel time reliability, truck travel time, peak hour excesses delay, okay, so sorry, I'm missing one part here. But then the focus of this study was the level of travel time reliability, or LOTR, and truck travel time, not including the other 2 metrics, PHEV and CMAC. And the reason being that the reason was the inadequacy of the spatial data for the latter two performance measures. Next slide, please. As part of the PD14 under mobility objective, 3 categories were identified: reliability and congestion, environmental impact, and multimodal operation. For reliability and congestion objective, the OLOS dashboard tracks the annual progress in 3 ways: manage congestion on the roads by reducing vehicle miles traveled by 10% by 2030, achieve the annual incident clearance time of 20 minutes for highways covered by safety, patrol, and heavy tool vehicles by 2022, and achieve an OLOS grade C or better for 80% of the state highway system by 2022. The next couple slides show if the network meet the mobility, reliability, and congestion targets set by PD14. Vehicles in this graph, vehicles mile traveled on a per capita presents a measure indicating use on the roadways. The goal is to reduce congestions on the roads by reducing vehicle miles traveled by 10% by 2030 relative to current levels. And this level is still undergoing, yeah, it's still undergoing and not finalized yet. The next slide shows that under use case 6, sorry. Okay. Under use case 6 in the screenshot, the goal is to get an annual incident clearance time of 20 minutes for monitored state highways. In 2020, as shown in the picture, we're still not meeting the goal, but the ICT is better than 2019. In the next slide, under use case 6, still, this chart shows the overall network performance that gives an easy and quick way to gauge the network performance in terms of PTI. And hopefully it's easy enough for decision makers to understand. The goal in here was to get more than 80% of the monitored roadways to operate at Class C, OLOS or better. In 2020, as shown, we're meeting the targets, meaning that over 80% of our roadways, the green portion in the graph, are operating at OLOS grade C or better. The next slide, Erin. It's basically the same chart as the previous slide, but reporting more details on the OLOS grading system. As shown in 2020, not only we're meeting the target, but also more roadway segments are falling within the OLOS grade C or better compared to 2019, meaning that monitored roads are less congested in 2020 versus 2019. The next slide. And this is pretty much the same data in a summary table format, but shows various classifications of roadways, with the first row being the entire network, and it's what was shown in the previous charts. With that, I'm gonna wrap up my presentation, and I brought up pointed out the link to our dashboard in case someone is interested. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I can try to address.
Thank you so much, Elena. We appreciate that. Was very informative presentation on operation level of service. So much appreciated. And are there any questions for Elena? We'll give everybody just a minute here. Either drop your question in the chat or feel free to use the raise hand feature. Okay, fantastic. Thank you again, Elena. So we are going to now introduce Casey Wells. Casey is the statewide planning branch manager for the Texas Department of Transportation. He has been with the Texas DOT since 2017. Casey oversees the team responsible for Texas DOT's long-range transportation plan, statewide resiliency plan, performance-based project evaluations, state and federal performance measures, and other programs. He was recently project manager for Texas DOT's Freight Network Technology and Operations Plan, Permian Basin Freight Plan, and Rio Grande Valley Regional Freight Plan. Prior to his employment with the Texas Department of Transportation, Casey served as freight planner at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, where he began his career in 2008 following graduation from the University of Kentucky. So Casey, thank you so much for joining us, and please feel free to take it away and share your screen with your presentation.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. I'm gonna do my presentation in PDF mode because I've never been able to figure out the presenter mode. So, okay, so as you mentioned, I'm Casey Wells, Statewide Planning Branch Manager for TxDOT. I'm here today to speak a little bit about some of the data visualization tools that we utilize at TxDOT with respect to performance measures. So I'll just jump right in. So I just wanted to start off with what measures TxDOT use for mobility performance management. Most of our stuff is related to travel time and delay, planning time index. We also like to look at congestion cost. I'd like to put a dollar amount on delay whenever we can, because that seems to be pretty effective with messaging. And then also wasted fuel. And we like to look at all this stuff for both all vehicle and for trucks. Some specific mobility monitoring efforts that are kind of specific to TxDOT outside of some of the required performance measures reporting that we do. We work a lot with Texas A&M Transportation Institute. They're kind of they kind of function sort of as a staff extension in some cases, but then also we fund a lot of research that they help us with. So a few of the things that they've helped us with: the Urban Mobility Report, Texas 100 Most Congested Road Sections, other key performance measures that we do, just reporting to our legislature. Some tools that they help us out with: TCAT, which is Truck Congestion Analysis Tool, and Compat, another congestion analysis tool. And then we also are working with basically a pooled fund to develop a tool that helps determine project benefits with respect to congestion improvements. And that tool is called Fix It. So I'm going to highlight a few of the ones that I just covered: the Urban Mobility Report, the Top 100, and TCAT. So the Urban Mobility Report covers 494 urban areas in the United States. And it just basically collects data, visualizes that data all in one place for several urban areas, with the data metrics shown on the right side there, performance based on. So annual hours of delay, again, travel time index, congestion cost, and all this stuff for truck and all vehicle, and then also fuel consumption, CO2, that sort of thing. The tool or the report reports on data going back all the way to 1982, and Texas has 34 of the U.S.'s most congestion urban areas based on this report. And Texas, while they have 34 of those, they also account for 9% of the population shown in the urban areas covered by this report. So just a quick highlight of how Texas performs in the Urban Mobility Report. So as I mentioned, we have about 9% of the total delay in 2019 and 11% in 2020. So we've picked up that percentage quite a bit, whenever you look at the big picture. For truck delay, Texas had about 9.9% in 2019 and 11.7% in 2020. So again, as far as our comparison to other urban areas, we're definitely starting to pick up our share, or more so, our share of the truck delay nationally, and the delay in general is increasing relative to other areas. Onto the Texas 100 Most Congested Road Segments. This is a legislative required report that we do every year for Texas, updated annually since 2009. That was the first year that we did it. Road segments are ranked by delay per mile, and some of the reporting that we do here is on delay, wasted fuel, and congestion cost. We do this analysis on 1,800 road segments across Texas urban areas, and it amounts to almost 10,000 miles of road. You can see the miles covered on the right side, about 9,400 miles that are included in this assessment. And then, of course, we post our results on the website, and also it ends up becoming a pretty big presentation, both to TxDOT leadership, TxDOT Commission, but also to our state legislature. So here's a look at the top 10 most congested locations in Texas, and the top 2 have been 1, 2 for basically since the report started up. So Harris County is Houston, and Travis County is Austin. And you can see here Harris and Travis and Dallas, and even Tarrant County is also in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So our top 10 most congested roadway segments are all in Houston, Austin, and Dallas, Fort Worth area. So the report is the top 100. This is just a look at the top 10. Truck congestion analysis tool is one of my favorites, TCAT for short. So it basically pulls in data specific to trucks related to truck mobility and performance. We pull in multiple years of congestion data, and we end up showing a year-over-year improvement, and I'll show you that here in a second. And you can kind of filter the tool by various geographies if you're interested in statewide or regional corridor based. So out of the TCAT comes the truck congestion report card. And so we try to show a year-to-year change in select measures. So you can see the 4 cards up towards the top. Annual person's hours of delay. I've got it sorted to the Permian Basin region. So in 2021, the annual person hours of delay was 2.7 million. In 2020, it was 3.4. So with COVID, we saw a huge drop in person hours of truck delay in the Permian Basin. Similarly let's look at the middle right of that picture. So annual vehicle miles of travel. So in the Permian Basin in 2021, there were 3.5 million vehicle miles, and in 2020, there were 3.8. So we dropped in vehicle miles traveled in 2021 by about 320,000 miles. And then down at the bottom of these congestion report cards, there's just a summary for trucks and then a summary for all vehicles. And so for all vehicles, that's where we show GHG and congestion costs and the yearly change. And again, those bottom 2 cards are specific to the Permian Basin region. I just did that for an example. Bringing you back over to the left side, you can drill down by specific geographic areas. So whenever you open up the truck congestion report card, you'll see it's basically set by default to statewide. But then you can drill down by TxDOT district, which we have 25 of. Regions is kind of loosely defined. So Permian Basin region, Rio Grande Valley region, that's South Texas, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area. So you can kind of look at it by bigger, broader regions. But then you can also look at individual MPOs, which we currently have 23 of. And then you can look at all the way down to the county level. And then we've also got a few select corridors, like the Ports to Plains corridor, for example, the I-35 corridor. So if you're interested in a corridor view, you can drill down specific to those corridors. And then again, reporting some of the data that we look at, delay, travel time index, average speed, BMT, GHG, and congestion cost. And that's all I had for today. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about the congestion analysis tools that I showed you this morning.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey, for sharing what TxDOT is doing and interesting information on that urban mobility report. Again, any questions for Casey, please feel free to drop them in the chat or use the raise hand feature. We'll give y'all just a minute to do that. Okay, and we actually want to open it up to questions for anybody, any of our presenters or speakers. If you have any questions for Ryan or Kelly Lund, we want to start a dialogue we have a lot of states represented here. So if anybody has any questions or any insights from your own state that you want to share, please feel free to do that now. Again, you're welcome to put that in the chat. You're welcome to just hop on with your video and audio on and share with us. Okay, well, I'm gonna let y'all have a little bit longer. If you think of some questions or anything you want to share, please feel free to jump in. But thank you again to all of our speakers. Great representation from around the country of what the various departments of transportation are doing in the performance measurement world. We also appreciate the participants who've been on this call. Like I said, we have a lot of our states represented. It's so great to everybody get together and learn and share with each other. We hope you felt the information shared during this event has been valuable and hope that you've learned something you can apply in your own work. Again, a few just closing housekeeping items. This webinar has been recorded, will be made available to you. We'll also send you an email in the coming weeks with links to the recordings and the presenters' presentations and slide decks. If you have any questions that we were not able to answer, please feel free to email us. Our email address is info@xfactorutah.com. We'll drop that in the chat as well, so you have it available. And then, like Ryan mentioned, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to us or to Ryan. If you have any interesting measurements that are going on in your states, any future things, anything specifically that your state is doing that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. And I am going to turn the time over once again to Ryan to close us out.
Thank you all so much for jumping on this. Just so y'all aware, we are going to have this, like Aaron talked about, we're going to have this presented back to our FHWA group, whether it's in, you know, the video where we consider the video. We're also going to be putting it into a written document as well for a final kind of report to summarize it. We really base this off of some more information that's going to be coming out from Matt Hardy with the AASHTO group, and so we are super excited to keep working with you all. I felt like this was a very, you know, low-key performance virtual presentation. We really wanted to make it as collaborative as we could, and so appreciate all the people presenting and talking, and as well as Kelly Lund and his group with FHWA for letting us do this and putting this together. So just to wrap a bow on it, thank you all. Appreciate you all for coming, and hopefully we cross paths shortly, and appreciate you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you again to everyone for your participation, and have a great day.